Hello, I'm Steve Alsip of Rathbone Group, and this is On Subrogation. Today we're talking about utility claims, or claims involving utilities such as electric, your cable, phone lines, and even sewage and water utilities. So claims that involve utilities are complicated because they have unique standards of care, there are unique issues of liability, and there are also unique statutory and regulatory frameworks that are set up to govern each utility and the tort claims that can arise out of each utility. So each utility has rules that are established in cooperation with their state regulatory agency. And the regulatory agencies are typically your Public Utilities Commission, your Public Service Commission, your Corporation Commission, or your Regulatory Commission. If it's in the case of a municipal power company, you have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as well. These agencies work with the legislatures and they create statutory frameworks, and they also oversee basically compliance with each utility to make sure that the public is safe and that the public gets the sort of utilities that they need. A lot of utility claims actually have to do with overhead power lines. And this is because the electrical infrastructure in the United States is so pervasive. There's overhead lines, underground lines, there can be combinations of both. The electrical distribution system, it all works as part of a giant massive infrastructure that transports the energy from the power generator or the utility or the company to your end users, which are, people like you and me or your businesses. And due to the prevalence of all of the infrastructure of wires and cables, there is a high potential for danger and tort claims. These structures can cause problems for people. There are dangers involved with electricity and other utilities as well. So there's a big potential for legal disputes when you're dealing with things that can cause a lot of property damage or a lot of, say, personal injury or something like that. One of the cases that I have had going on is a case where a trampoline has been caught by the wind and blown into overhead power lines, and then those overhead power lines cause a fire that spreads to 2 or 3 houses. And in cases like that, you have a pretty easy idea of figuring out where the initial negligent party is. It's the trampoline owner who didn't tie his trampoline down. But is there additional liability on behalf of the utility company based on how their lines are run? Or is it too close to homes? Is it too highly flammable if it's hit by a trampoline? Those sorts of things. I also have plenty of cases where a vehicle has hit a telephone pole or a power pole, and it's caused that to come down. I've had plenty of cases where a vehicle has caught a line because the vehicle's too high, caught a line and yanked it off of a house. And the pulling of all the wires off of the house has actually caused quite a bit of damage and can actually cause a fire as well. I have tons of cases where there's lines that have fallen onto vehicles or poles that have fallen onto vehicles and transformers, all sorts of things that are overhead line problems that can cause damage down on the ground. And there are unique liabilities for the utilities for these sorts of situations. It can either have to do with negligence of a party that caused those lines to come down or caused the power pole to fall down, or it can be something that the utility company was just negligent in maintaining. If they did some sort of negligent maintenance or didn't check on their equipment for long enough, it can be a negligence problem on the behalf of the utility. Now, we also have claims for underground lines. Typically, underground utility lines are not power. Most of the time you see a lot more cable and phone, internets, these sorts of things. They're run in what's called a joint trench underneath the ground. And most of the time in residential neighborhoods or any kind of commercial area where you have a lot of lines that are going to a lot of houses, they'll put the cable and the phone lines down in the same place and run them out to each house. If a person is doing digging or excavation negligently and they damage those lines, this can cause quite a bit of property damage to not only the utility to put the lines down, but also end line consumers who have got loss of use. They've also got other problems. As I mentioned, if you pull on lines, typically there's some kind of collateral damage at the other end of that line. So we do handle claims that have to do with underground lines as well. The most common problem that you run into on underground utility claims is that the person doing digging didn't call the 1-800 call before you dig line, or it's also known as dig safe in certain places. There's an 811 number. Basically, anytime you're going to be doing some excavating, it's a good idea to call these numbers and find out if there are utilities under there, because if you dig those up, you could be looking at a hefty bill when the utility has to come out and repair everything and put those lines back in the ground. and they're going to look to whoever dug them up for the damage. These sorts of cases are also complicated where you have a 1-800 call before you dig line. Someone actually does call it before they dig. Let's say they're putting in a fence or they're putting in a new driveway or something. They call the line. The locating company comes out. They locate all the lines and mark them with paint, and they don't do it right. The excavation company digs. They dig up a line. Now who's liable? Is it going to be the company that dug up the line, or is it going to be the location company? In these sorts of cases, you would want to look towards both, but you kind of lean towards the location company if you have any evidence that the lines were placed wrong, or if they missed a line, something like that. They would be the negligent party there, and you could pursue them for your damages based on the tort claim of the damaged lines. There are also certain kinds of cases that are utility cases that I like to lump into what I call a product defect sort of situation. If you have a case where there's a power surge to a residence or a whole neighborhood, where everybody's house gets a power surge, that can fry all the electrical equipment in the house. So anything you have plugged in is toast. And you can kind of see how that would stack up to a pretty high insurance claim right away. If everything that you have, think about what's plugged in your house right now. If it were all gone tomorrow, chances are you would have a claim that's worth something. The problem comes in, how do you prove those power surges? How do you prove what happened? In these cases, you're going to need to get an expert to come in and hopefully do a scene examination and look at some of the components of the electrical utility to see what went wrong. Did they drop a neutral or something like that? What caused the surge or the fire or the issue in the home based on the product that the utility is selling, and in this case, electricity. You also have cases that, like I mentioned before, deal with negligent maintenance. So if a utility has a transformer or a line or something like that that they just haven't dedicated the proper care to, and the line degrades or the transformer degrades and slowly causes a problem. Let's say transformer is smoking and eventually explodes. That explosion can cause property damage that Rathbone Group could be called to come in and try to recover for. So what you're looking at here is the utility negligent? Now, in utility company cases, a utility is not held to the standard to where they're expected to monitor every line and every transformer and every pole they have on their entire jurisdiction at all times. That is quite correctly seen as an impossibility. They can't be everywhere at once. They can't have eyes everywhere at once. However, if a utility is on notice that they have a problem, let's say there's a line that's just down and someone calls it in and says, you've got a line down on Main Street. If the utility company doesn't do anything to correct this problem, they do nothing to fix the line, and the line's just laying there sparking or whatever it is, eventually someone runs it over or it causes a fire, let's say, that utility company could be on the hook for those damages, even though they didn't know beforehand that the line was going to come down. Once the line did come down, they are required to go and fix that line. If you can show that the utility company had notice of a problem and did nothing to correct it, and then your damages were a result, I think you've got a pretty good claim against that utility company. So as we mentioned from the top, these claims involving utility companies, they're very complicated by unique standards of care and issues of liability. And there's always new statutory and regulatory things to learn in each jurisdiction. So if you have any questions about utility claims, please reach out to us at rathbonegroup.com. My name is Steve Alsip, and this has been On Subrogation.